Spread the fire, fam. Welcome back to SMWX. If you're new around here, my name is Dr Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, and on this channel, we explore South African politics through interviews and analysis. So, SMWX was recently invited to an EFF press conference addressed by Julius Malema, the president of the EFF. Now, what was cool about this is that it seems that SMWX is slowly being recognized as a media force to be reckoned with, because this engagement was for many of South Africa's senior political journalists and people in the media industry. So SABC, Newsroom Africa, ENCA, lots of newspapers, News 24, Mail and Guardian. They were all invited, and we were invited too, which is testament to the fact that you are building this channel and helping us to grow into a force to be reckoned with. And we've been invited to a few other engagements, so we'll certainly report on those and what we found. So in this episode, what I want to do is tell you the question that I asked to Julius Malema and then analyze that question and see what the response means going forward. So effectively, I asked Julius Malema a question about Cyril Ramaphosa and whether he would be president after the election. I think this is a key question for this election because many different political parties will see their leaders facing pressure or be in a good position depending on how their parties perform. So what I want to do in this episode is I'll play my question so you can see what question I asked, and then we'll play you a clip of how Julius Malema responded to that question, and then we'll analyze the response and what it means going forward, because I think it says very interesting things both about the EFF and about the ANC, and interestingly, though you might not expect it, about the DA as well. So take a look at the question that I asked at this media engagement for media practitioners and journalists. Mr. Malema, thank you. President Cyril Ramaphosa emerged victorious at the most recent ANC elective conference just weeks after reports emerged that he was considering resignation. What's your assessment of the current balance of forces within the ANC? Do you think his position has strengthened or weakened since that conference? And do you think he will be president of South Africa after the election? Okay, so that was the question I asked. And let's have a look at how Julius Malema responded to my question. You'll see some very interesting things that you can pick up here, both about the ANC, EFF, and indeed about the DA, and I'll explain why later. So let's see the response to the question here.
The resignation by President Ramaphosa is there. The president resigned when the panel released the results. When it said there are serious issues that President Ramaphosa must answer on Phala Phala. And when those panel outcomes came, the president resigned out of his own conscience, only to be persuaded by a political cabal that he must stay because his leaving means they are going. So where there was central, Pravin was central, and then don't worry, we'll squash this thing. Then the first thing they did was to use their majority in parliament to squash the truth under Nosfear Mapisa Ngakul. From that high chair of a speaker into the dock. Very interesting. Defender of Phala Phala. Had she held that guy accountable, maybe we'll be sympathetic. We have no little sympathy with a person who protected corruption of Ramaphosa in parliament. Not only that, you know, the day I once asked Floyd, I said, I think we must resign from this thing and just go and build an organization. That's the day they rejected an investigation on ESCOM corruption. No one said there is corruption. We said, but there are serious allegations, worse from the former CEO and all of that. Let's go and check what's happening. You check what? This anti-corruption government of Ramaphosa defending not anything outside what is being done, an ad hoc committee that looks into the corruption of ESCOM, which is what members of parliament do from time to time. said no. So what is going to rescue, I was listening to the recording of the NEC meeting of the ANC. What is going to rescue Ramaphosa is if he maintains the percentage or it goes up. Anything less than that is going to be asked by his own faction, or we need to try someone else because it's not working. The ANC strategy was outlined in that recording. I don't know why you don't have it. I must give you. No, I will only give you. They must get it from you. The ANC strategy is we have to get the same number or increase. And for us to get the same number, we need 11 million votes. If at a 70% turnout, 11 million vote will put us at 57%. But anything above that, at least there will be an increase. If you get less than 11 million votes, that's a problem. Why is it a problem? They know. It then starts internal debate. Is this guy really being helpful or not? It's the same as the EFF, by the way. If EFF declines its support now, my name is going to be on the table, or no matter, maybe let's try someone, man, because we tried many times and it's not working. It works like that in political organizations. Once you decline support, then the discussion starts around your head. That's why you see me working like a headless chicken, because I don't want to be part of any topic. Everybody must just say, when you say Julius, what are you saying?
Okay, so let's analyze this. The first thing that I think is fascinating about this response is that Julius Malema says that he has recordings of ANC NEC meetings. Like, that's just crazy. Imagine an opposition party being able to access secret and exclusive recordings of the most important meeting of their opponents. So the ANC apparently is leaking some of its NEC meetings to opposition parties, which just shows you how crazy things are getting in this election. So, hey, if anyone wants to leak some NEC meetings to SMWX, come through, and then we can analyze the leaked recordings. So, you know where to find us in the comments and the descriptions. You can find our email if you want to leak us any NEC recordings. But that's wild. It just shows that there's deep factional division within the ANC, that someone would actually give Julius Malema the ANC's recordings. So what I think is also interesting about this response about President Ramaphosa is that it's clear, obviously every party is trying to put forward a brave face, but actually it has emerged that I think EWN and Tsidi Madia, shout out to Tsidi Madia at EWN, has actually listened to these leaked recordings. She also managed to get her hands on them. Tsidi, share them with us as well. That apparently President Ramaphosa, in this meeting, according to the EWN report, is dissatisfied with the energy of the ANC campaign, and he doesn't feel that the campaign is really as energetic as it should be. And this echoes what Malema said as well, because what Malema said to me in that question was the NEC was saying that if the ANC improves its votes, that'll be good for Cyril Ramaphosa. So remember, the ANC is at like 57. But if they lose electoral ground, no matter who you are as the party leader, that puts you in a weak position. And I think that we'll start to see increased political pressure if Ramaphosa indeed decides to stay on, because there were those serious reports of his decision to resign even before the ANC elective conference. But if the ANC gets less than 57, you can expect there to be pressure on Ramaphosa. Now, what does that mean? Well, I'm pretty sure the ANC is going to get less than 57. I think it's going to go under 50, as you'll see in many different interviews and pieces of analysis on this channel. But what that means is that we need to start thinking about after the election now and not just the election. So after the election, if the ANC loses electoral ground, you shouldn't just be thinking about coalitions. You should be thinking about the leadership of the party. Will the ANC still want to retain Cyril Ramaphosa as its leader, or will he be seen as tainted if the ANC fails to improve its electoral majority? I think Ramaphosa has had a very firm grip on the party for a long time now, but it will be difficult because he will effectively be a lame duck president and a lame duck ANC president after this election, which means that people's political futures and their political fortunes after this election will no longer be tied to Cyril Ramaphosa. And in the ANC, people have already started thinking about the future. Who could be the next president? How do I ally myself with that person? And so Ramaphosa's political capital will begin to wane after this election. And it'll be one of the key questions of the post-election as to whether he will decide to stay on. If he will be president of the country, I think if he's not president of the country, he definitely won't stay on of his own volition, because I can't see him wanting to be leader of the opposition. But will he stay on if he has the chance to be president of the country? Will he not? And what kind of deals will have to be made? What's fairly clear is that from my interview with Floyd Chivambu earlier on this channel as well, is that the EFF have said that Cyril Ramaphosa resigning is a precondition for them to go into an election coalition. So they're going to put pressure on Ramaphosa if the ANC wants to go with the EFF in this election. So it's going to be interesting to see if the ANC chooses to go with, say, the DA or a different party that doesn't make that demand. And that will be one of the key game changers. Or maybe the ANC sacrifices Ramaphosa in order to hold on to power and go into government with the EFF. So as you can see, this question reveals quite a lot. And that's why I thought long and hard about which question to ask in this press conference. But I thought that one would give us insight, not just into the election, but into developments after the election. Now, there's another interesting thing that Malema says about him and the EFF, which is that if the EFF doesn't do well, then pressure will be put on him. And remember that EFF is going to its own national conference at the end of this year. So, look, I think the EFF is not going to get less than it got in the last election. But there is a question as to whether the MK party has eclipsed the EFF in terms of the news cycle of this election. And some polls even put the MK party in third place after the ANC and the DA, which would mean the EFF would only be the fourth biggest party nationally. Now, so the question for this election is also not just how well the ANC does, but how well the DA and the EFF do, and which of the three big parties will be in a better position after this election. So, of course, I don't think Malema's position within the EFF is under any doubt or is under any challenge, but he does actually admit that if the EFF doesn't improve, I think it's at around 11% right now of the election, or just 10.89 or something. If it doesn't improve beyond that and go to, at least 13, 14, somewhere there, then that wouldn't be seen as a particularly strong electoral performance. And maybe elements within the EFF, although I think they're very marginal, would start to question at least why the EFF hasn't performed as well as it should, given that it's now been, in power for, not in power, but at least in parliament for 10 years. So remember, I think what Malema's response also shows is that this election matters for all the parties and all the leaders. And we could be in a situation which many different leaders all the leaders are going to have to explain what happened after this election to their constituencies. And they're going to be doing that while negotiating coalitions. And of course, if parties increase their vote, if the EFF goes to 15%, as some polls have said, it's going to be a great day for them, and it's going to be great for Malema because he'll consolidate his position and base within the EFF. But if the EFF loses ground or stays stagnant, then questions will be asked about, to what extent can the EFF push beyond this ceiling that it's currently set at around 11-12% of the vote. Now, this has an interesting implication for another political party leader, because I've looked at Cyril Ramaphosa and I've looked at Julius Malema. But I want to think about another party leader, and that's John Steenhuisen. So the DA is currently at 20% of the vote. And again, the same logic will apply. So if the DA stays stagnant at 20, which is a possibility, and fails to grow, say, beyond 24% or so, then I think you can expect the knives to be out for John Steenhuisen within the DA as well. Remember, John Steenhuisen rose to the leadership of the DA by saying Mmusi Maimane didn't improve the vote of the DA. And because of that poor electoral performance in 2019, the party needed a new leader. Well, now the shoe will be on the other foot. And now suddenly 4 fingers will be pointed back at John Steenhuisen, because if he is unable to advance the DA beyond where it is at around 20% of the vote, or if it's just 21 or 22, then I think you can expect serious contestation within the DA in the period to follow. I remember I was at the IEC Results Center before the 2019 election, and I was having a conversation with a senior DA person, and I was saying, hey, what's going on? And already the political maneuvering to get Mmusi Maimane out of the party was happening before the election. So you must understand and think about this election, not just in terms of the outcomes, but the way that all these parties are maneuvering behind the scenes, and whether they will support the leader that put them into this election or whether that leader could be ousted. In an extreme scenario, we could have a situation in South Africa where both John Steenhuisen and Cyril Ramaphosa are under pressure, and maybe not even the leaders of their parties as we go into this new era in South African politics after a long time. So remember, the plates can shift very quickly, and because we're going into coalition season and because there's so many new dynamics, we could see big changes in our politics after this election. So the fun will certainly not stop on May the 29th. It will only just begin. But I would keep a very close eye on the DA election results. So what I would say is DA, anything below 24 or so, I would say look out for John Steenhuisen and look out for internal rumblings in the DA. EFF, anything below 11 or 12, I think they would be disappointed. And I would say ANC, anything below 57 is going to be a problem, but below 50, then have a very close look at Cyril Ramaphosa's position. And of course, below 45 or early 40s, then things could really get tricky. So that's another thing that I think comes out of that response. Now, let's conclude by just thinking about what this all means going forward. I think what this means is that this election is going to be a crunch election, not just for the ANC, but for all the political parties, especially the big 3 political parties. And the question then becomes, who does the MK party take the most from? Does the MK take from the EFF, or does it take from the ANC, or does it take from the IFP maybe? So that's a synopsis of the question that I asked. Why did I ask the question? Well, firstly, because I think that the Phala issue has fallen away from spotlight, and I think it's a key question of accountability in this election. Number 2, I think people are mostly just focusing on parties and not individual leaders, and individual leaders will have a very serious role to play in South African politics going forward. And then finally, Julius Malema is just an interesting political analyst of ANC dynamics. I mean, he obviously knows a lot about what's going on in the ANC. So what he can tell us is often better than what other political analysts can tell us about the ANC. And it's interesting to hear what he thinks will happen with Cyril Ramaphosa after this election. So, will we see a new president after the 29th of May? Will we see new party leaders in the weeks and months that follow the election? Who knows? All of this we'll be keeping a very close eye on as SMWX. Thank you for tuning in as we analyze that question at the press conference. We've also been invited to a press conference by the National Prosecuting Authority, so we'll probably do the same thing, and I'll ask a question there. We'll take a look at how the NDPP responds, and then we'll analyze her response. Like, share, subscribe. Help us on the road to 100,000 subscribers. We're trying to get to 100K before the election. And keep it locked on SMWX. Aye.